All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to This Explainer. So, have you ever felt like you're putting in just a massive amount of effort to build a good habit or, hit a big goal, only to find yourself right back at square one a couple of weeks later? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're unpacking the science and strategy behind James Clear's absolute game changer, Atomic Habits. We're going to see why massive success absolutely does not require massive action. Instead, it's all about a commitment to tiny, seemingly insignificant daily tweaks.
Okay, get a load of this utterly bizarre list of changes. Back in 2003, performance director Dave Brailsford took over the British cycling team. And just to give you some context here, British cyclists had endured nearly a century of absolute mediocrity. In 110 years, no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France. Honestly, they were so underwhelming that top bike manufacturers in Europe literally refused to sell them gear because they thought it would tank their brand, right? So Brailsford comes in with his strategy he calls the aggregation of marginal gains. Basically, forget the massive overhaul. Let's just find a 1% improvement in literally everything. They redesigned bike seats, they wore electrically heated overshorts to keep their muscles warm, they even went as far as hiring a surgeon to teach them the optimal way to wash their hands to avoid catching a cold. Oh, and they painted the inside of the team truck pristine white, just so they could spot little specks of dust that might mess up the finely tuned bikes. It sounds totally crazy, right?
But man, look at what happens when these weird, marginal 1% improvements start to compound. The results came in faster than anyone could have possibly imagined. Just 5 years after Brailsford took the reins, the team completely dominated the 2008 Beijing Olympics, snagging an insane 60% of the available gold medals. Fast forward to 2012, 9 Olympic records and their first ever Tour de France victory. These little tweaks compounded so aggressively that within a single decade, they captured 178 world championships and 5 Tour de France titles. I mean, it is widely regarded as the most successful run in cycling history.
So what does this all mean? Well, it all comes down to the math, and it's pretty mind-blowing. If you manage to get just 1% better each day for one single year, you don't just get a little better. You end up nearly 38 times better by the time you're done. 38 times! Now flip that. If you get 1% worse each day, you basically decline all the way down to 0. We're so conditioned to believe that massive success requires massive action. But the math? The math tells a completely different story. The difference a tiny improvement makes over time is, well, it's literally staggering.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core concept here. Habits multiply exactly like compound interest. Just like money multiplies over time, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them. And here's the catch. Early on, you really don't see the difference. I mean, if you go to the gym 3 days in a row, you're still out of shape, right? But over time, the gap between the trajectory of getting 1% better and 1% worse becomes massive. Really, your outcomes are just a lagging measure of your habits. Think about it. Your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits, and your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits.
It's kind of like shifting an airplane's nose by just 3.5 degrees right at takeoff. Picture this. You're a pilot flying from Los Angeles to New York City. If you adjust your heading just 3.5 degrees south, it is a barely noticeable change in the moment. The nose of the plane moves, a few feet? But when that tiny shift is magnified across the entire United States, you end up landing in Washington, D.C., which is hundreds of miles away from your original target. A slight change in your daily habits guides your life to a completely different destination in the exact same way.
Okay, but this begs the question. If small habits are actually so incredibly powerful, why do we quit so easily? Why on earth is it so hard to just stick with them? Imagine an ice cube sitting on a table in a freezing cold room. You can literally see your breath. It's 25 degrees. Then, the room slowly starts to warm up. 26, 27, 28 degrees. And still, the ice cube just sits there. Absolutely nothing happens. 29, 30, 31, still nothing. It isn't until we hit exactly 32 degrees that the ice finally begins to melt. That single 1-degree shift, which honestly seemed no different from all the temperature bumps that came before it, suddenly unlocks a massive change. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that those previous temperature increases, they weren't wasted at all. They were just storing up the potential required to unleash a major breakthrough.
Now, this stored potential introduces us to a pretty dangerous phase. It's known as the Valley of Disappointment. You know this phase. It's that immensely frustrating period where you're putting in all the daily work, you're running every day, eating right, saving a few bucks, but you aren't seeing any linear progress because, well, the results are delayed. We all naturally expect progress to be this perfect, straight upward line. So when we don't see tangible results right off the bat, we fall straight into this valley and just give up.
But remember the ice cube, your work isn't being wasted, it's just being stored up so you can cross what's called the plateau of latent potential.
So how do we survive that valley? Well, we need a massive paradigm shift. We have to stop focusing on goals, which, let's be real, are just the momentary results you want, and start focusing on systems, the actual day-to-day processes that lead to those results. Let's say you're a coach. Sure, your goal might be to win a championship, but your system is how you recruit players, how you manage your assistant coaches, and how you run those daily practices. If you completely ignored the scoreboard and literally just focused on your system every single day, you would still get incredible results.
Think about it. Every single Olympian out there has the exact same goal, to win a gold medal, right? So the goal inherently isn't what separates the winners from the losers. Plus, achieving a goal is really just a momentary change. You might spend all day cleaning a messy room, but if you keep your sloppy habits, guess what? It's going to be a disaster again tomorrow. Goals also kind of restrict your happiness. You're constantly putting off feeling good until you cross some arbitrary finish line. And finally, when you do achieve a goal, what pushes you forward afterward? That is exactly why so many people just rubber band back to their old habits. Systems, on the other hand, allow you to fall in love with the process so you can just keep playing the game continuously.
And that brings us to the true meaning of an atomic habit. It's a tiny, 1% routine that acts as a fundamental building block within a much, much larger system of growth. You know, just as atoms are the building blocks of molecules, these atomic habits are the irreducible units of your success. They're incredibly small, but man, are they mighty.
These atomic habits ultimately build into the deepest layer of habit formation. We can actually visualize behavior change as 3 distinct layers, almost like the layers of an onion. And honestly, changing habits is usually so hard because we're almost always trying to change the wrong thing. So the outermost layer is your outcomes. This is changing what you get, like losing weight or finally writing that book. The middle layer is your processes, changing what you do, like starting a new gym routine. Now, most people try to change by focusing entirely on that outer ring, the outcome they want, and then they try to figure out the process. But they completely ignore the deepest, arguably most crucial layer, which is their underlying identity. Identity is all about changing what you believe, your worldview, your self-image, all your internal biases.
To really illustrate this, imagine 2 people who are both trying to turn down a cigarette. The first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." I mean, that sounds super reasonable, right? But internally, they are still clinging tightly to their old identity. They still view themselves as a smoker who is just trying to be something else.
But then the second person declines and just says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." Boom. That one simple sentence signals a profound identity shift. Smoking is a part of their past, not their present. It's simple. Behavior that is incongruent with how you truly see yourself simply won't last. If you want more money, but your identity is someone who consumes rather than creates, you're always going to be pulled right back towards spending. We see this powerfully in action with an entrepreneur named Brian Clark. He was a lifelong nail chewer, and he actually managed to stop biting his nails for a little while just through sheer mindful willpower. But he solidified the habit permanently by doing something a little unexpected. He went and booked his first ever manicure. By doing that, he completely shifted his identity. He proved to himself that he was now the kind of person who takes pride in caring for their hands. That new identity made the new habit permanent.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a rather provocative question to chew on. Look past your outcomes, look past those immediate goals you have set, and ask yourself this: do your 1% daily habits actually reflect the identity of the person you want to become? Remember, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Keep making those tiny tweaks, focus on who you want to be, and just watch the compound interest of self-improvement completely transform your life. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch